This trade proposal has been circulating around Broncos Twitter recently, and let me tell you what, it's stirred up a lot of controversy. It's a trade proposal here from former New York Jets general manager Mike Tannenbaum on ESPN's Get Up. It's a straight up player-for-player trade. The New York Jets would receive wide receiver Jeudy. The Denver Broncos would receive quarterback Zach Wilson. This is a tweet that I have seen a lot of polarizing takes on. The Denver Broncos are looking to probably move on from Jeudy this offseason. He is one of the more valuable commodities that they have, especially as they look to acquire resources to build up their draft capital. Then we look at Zach Wilson. He's a young quarterback who was a former number 2 overall pick, but has had a lot of turmoil over his time with the New York Jets, and in the first 3 seasons of his career has really looked like just an all-out disaster, quite frankly. This is something that would certainly fill a need for the New York Jets as they're looking for a second wide receiver to pair alongside Garrett Wilson, but would this fill the need adequately for the Denver Broncos, who are looking for their true answer at quarterback after the Russell Wilson experiment blew up in their face? I don't think so, but before we outright dismiss this idea, I think we should at least do some research here and look at some of the numbers. I've already seen quite a bit of Zach Wilson tape. If these rumors heat up more, then I'll do a Zach Wilson film study. It's not something that I'm exactly wanting to do because I'm just going to be honest, his tape is pretty painful to look at. But if this does heat up, I will absolutely do a Zach Wilson film study. But let's go ahead and take a look at Pro Football Focus, which I know isn't everybody's cup of tea, but a lot of these rankings here, or actually every single one of these rankings, are based off of film. They're based off of what guys are seeing on tape, and it's very similar to what guys like myself do when we're grading tape. It's just a database that condenses it all into one place. That's why Pro Football Focus is the most respected outlet out there, in my opinion, even though from a lot of fans, I feel like they generate controversy because, yes, there is this notion that they don't know exactly what's going on in the play, but neither do we when we're watching film. If we're not in the building directly, we don't know exactly what's happening. We're basing off of our prior knowledge, our prior research, what we've seen tendency-wise before. Some of it is an element of guesswork. This isn't a perfect science here, but it's the best resource and outlet that we have to condense this based on what's being seen on film. So if Pro Football Focus isn't your flavor, then I suggest maybe you do a little bit more research into the processes that Pro Football Focus uses to get the data that they have, because I actually feel like for the most part it's a very sound process. But moving on from that, if we take a look at some of the raw numbers, first of all, completion percentage, just raw completion percentage, Zach Wilson was the second worst quarterback in the NFL behind only Bryce Young with a 60.1 raw completion percentage. Passing yards, another very raw stat that only tells you so much. He was the worst quarterback in the NFL, and this is minimum 50% of 846 dropbacks last year. So this doesn't account for quarterbacks like Jarrett Stidham, who only started 2 games. This is accounting for quarterbacks who played most of the season last year. So Zach Wilson, least amount of passing yards, yards per attempt, third worst at 6.2, touchdown passes, last 8th. Interceptions, granted, were down from his previous reckless style of play. He actually was the 3rd best quarterback in terms of throwing interceptions, but turnover-worthy plays, again, down. So that's one slight positive, if you want to call it a positive. If you look at the Jets' offense on tape, they really condensed Zach Wilson's role down into, if his first read isn't there, then run. And if you can't run, then just eat it and live to fight another down. He was throwing very safe, short, conservative passes, swing routes, check downs, screens, very rudimentary stuff that is extremely easy to execute. And even then, his efficiency just wasn't there running this offense. That's why the New York Jets had to turn things over eventually to Tim Boyle, because he was the quarterback that the Jets felt like gave them the best chance to win at that time. Then it was Trevor Siemian after that. So Zach Wilson, man, I don't know. Then you look at big time throws. He only had 10 big-time throws, a 2.6 big-time throw percentage last year. That's not great, man. If you're going to be conservative, you need to at least have 1 or 2 splash plays here or there, and Zach Wilson just didn't have those kind of splash plays. So for me, Zach Wilson does not make any sense for the Denver Broncos. And then when you take a look at it from the Jerry Jeudy perspective, I think the Denver Broncos can very realistically get, a 3rd-round pick, maybe even a 4th-round pick for Jerry Jeudy on the open market. I really feel like the Denver Broncos are much better suited trying to accumulate draft capital for Jeudy as opposed to trying to get a reclamation project in Zach Wilson where the odds are telling you that Zach Wilson isn't going to pan out. I think that it is best for the Denver Broncos to move on from Jerry Jeudy, and I think it's best for Jerry Jeudy to move on and separate from the Denver Broncos. But for this trade, no, man, this is not it. This is one of the most asinine trade proposals I've ever seen. Nothing personal against Mike Tannenbaum at all, but man, this is just not a great idea. He's looking at this purely from a New York Jets perspective, I feel like, and not looking at this whatsoever from a Denver Broncos perspective. The Jets are looking to offload Zach Wilson for relatively cheap. He wasn't even a functional backup quarterback last year after Aaron Rodgers went down. That was the plan for Zach Wilson, was for him to be the QB2, and now we're getting all of these media pundits that are giving the Jets a lot of crap for not getting a more adequate backup for Zach Wilson or for Aaron Rodgers, and I am definitely in that camp. I feel like the Jets' failure to more adequately address the backup quarterback position last year led them into the position that they were in last year. So for me, Zach Wilson is not the reclamation project that I want the Denver Broncos to take on. I'd much rather a guy like Sam Darnold, who actually has some confidence and has kind of built up his resume a little bit from his time in Carolina. Especially, I felt like in 2022, towards the end of the year, Sam Darnold played pretty well in Carolina. And then when he was in San Francisco, he's been nothing but lauded by the coaches out there. So if there's a former Jets quarterback that the Denver Broncos should take on as a reclamation project, for me, it's Sam Darnold. And trading away Jerry Jeudy to get a guy in Zach Wilson, who odds tell you is probably not going to succeed at the NFL level after his really dismal performance in the first 3 years of his career. No. And this is coming from somebody who was actually a fan of Zach Wilson coming out of BYU. I had him slightly graded higher than Trevor Lawrence because his college tape was actually really sound, but a lot of his flaws just continued over into the NFL level. And do I think that the situation he was put into in New York helped him? No, definitely not. If he would have gone to a much better situation and, quite frankly, to an offensive-minded head coach who really would have been able to invest the resources into developing him, then yeah, I could totally have maybe seen Zach Wilson panning out, but at the end of the day, it's also what's going on between the ears, and I do think Zach Wilson has shown maturity and growth in that aspect over his time in the NFL. He's not throwing his teammates under the bus like he did in 2022. Last year, he actually showed humbleness. He showed accountability for when stuff went wrong, always took the blame when something went wrong, and always deferred any of the praise for when things went right. So Zach Wilson, I feel like, said all the right stuff last year and showed a lot of growth just mentally, but I still don't think he's a starting caliber quarterback in the NFL, and I don't even know if he's a backup caliber quarterback in the NFL right now. I think that Zach Wilson might have to go to the UFL and maybe showcase what he can do in that sort of environment and earn his way back into the NFL. I actually think that a developmental league would do a player like Zach Wilson a lot of good, where he could get those live bullets and not completely risk damaging his entire NFL career. So yeah, man, if a UFL opportunity came for Zach Wilson as opposed to a backup role in the NFL, I wouldn't be opposed at all to him taking that role, but that's just my idea of it. I don't think that the Denver Broncos should make this trade. I'm curious though, Broncos country, do you think that this trade right here, Jerry Jeudy straight up for Zach Wilson, would be a good trade? Drop those comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts as always. Be sure to leave a like on this video as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are 2 free and easy ways to show your support. Helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out and helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, I am your host, Gage Madrid, saying peace out.